right, so we're here with Traci Collins, who's a candidate for Cheyenne City Council in Ward 1. Welcome.
Thank you for having
Glad
me.
to have you here. I'm Brian Martin. I'm the managing editor at the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, and we have a couple of our community reps of our editorial board with us today.
I'm Sharon Famer, Black Hills Energy.
Bob Feck, Cheyenne Animal Shelter.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you.
So welcome again, Traci. Glad to have you with us. We'll start with what specific issues or concerns caused you to run for city council this year?
I think that my biggest thing, this past fall, when Mr. Valdez had passed away, I had considered running. Several people and I had visited. They said, why don't you think about this? And I started attending council meetings, started really paying attention to what's going on in our community. And I was one of the finalists for the position. I was not selected, but I did continue to follow council, follow the city issues and ideas. It's almost embarrassing to say prior to that, I had a rough idea of the city, but I didn't really realize what was going on. And after that, I said, you know, this is a place that you can make a difference at our local level. And so it's time to get involved and run for the office when the filing period came.
Was there any particular issue or concern that the city's facing that caused you to actually go ahead and run?
There's several of those. I think our biggest issue that's facing us right now is the projected budget shortfalls, not just this year, but in the next coming year or two. And I think that we need to be very fiscally responsible with what we have and be able to maintain what I like to call our core. And in our core, I think that to keep that going, we need to make sure that we're maintaining our infrastructure, which is our water, our sewer, our sanitation. We need our safety, our fire and police protection. We also need to be concerned about our city employees. We rely on them so heavily to keep our city operational on a day-to-day basis. And if we don't have the core there, no one is going to want to come to Cheyenne or stay here. We need to really focus on and maintain that core.
You mentioned that you started going to the city council meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that you saw there that, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was?
You know, there's so many things that the city council is involved in that I don't think people are aware of, whether it is the zoning, pay raises, things like the chicken ordinance that was recently done, that all of these decisions that are made on a local level by the 10 members of the council and the mayor, that it really impacts us on a day-to-day basis, whether it is pay for city employees, whether your neighbor can have chickens, whether it is if your neighborhood is being rezoned or replatted from a residential to multi-density residential or from a commercial. And so all of those are things that really impact our surroundings in our city.
Traci, what qualifications do you bring to the table that will help you serve as a council member?
I think my longevity in Cheyenne. I have lived here most all of my life. I've lived here 43 years. I've always been a resident of Ward 1, and I have always been involved in local civics and charity organizations. And so by doing that and getting that community involvement and getting to know a lot of the different people in town, my daytime job also, I work with 90 to 100 different small businesses in any given week. And so I am able to talk to people, communicate with people, get their ideas, their suggestions. I think that communication is really important, whether you're talking to your neighbor, whether you're talking to a business owner, whether you're talking to city employees. You've got to be able to have those open lines of communication with people. And so I think that my background with my job, bringing those skills, also with my lifetime history, almost lifetime history of living in Cheyenne and being involved in the community are really good things. Also, having been on the board of several different charity organizations, I'm currently on the board of Habitat for Humanity of Laramie County, and that you really get to know a lot of different things. You learn how to do a budget. There's also a retail store that's involved with that. So in that aspect, you are learning your budgeting. You've got a plan. You've got, with Habitat, we're building houses. We work with the city, we work with developers, we work with water and the sanitation department with doing those. We also have the other side of it with the store where we got sales tax that we're generating too. And so I've got the knowledge with a lot of different areas. I may not be a full expert in any of them, but I'm willing to learn and I want to listen and learn from those that have been there and from the people in Cheyenne.
Can you remind us what you do? What's your
I
profession?
do advertising sales for Traders Publishing.
Tracy, you mentioned the building process.
Mhm.
So there's been some concern in the past that the building process in Cheyenne can be cumbersome. Have you seen,
I have not, that has not always been my expertise on the board with Habitat, but there are a lot of processes and a lot of steps that go through. And I think that evaluating some of that and seeing if we can streamline some of our policies and procedures to make it easier for people and for the city employees too, because I know that they've got a lot of involvement with having to come out and check whether the water taps are set, whether the foundation is right, the building inspectors through that entire process. And so I think if we can evaluate and look at that and see what has worked in other communities too, to do that is a very good thing that we need to always be open to new ideas and new suggestions.
Tracy, what do you believe is the biggest challenge facing the city, and can you name one or two others beyond whatever you think is the largest one?
I think the biggest thing facing us right now really is the economic downturn that we're anticipating in the next couple of years. That is huge. I know that the city council members and the mayor have really been struggling with the budget this year. They did an admirable job of coming in with the budget, and I think that that is the biggest thing that we really need to anticipate and be prepared for, just because we do not know what those revenues are that are going to be coming into the city in the next year, since we have so many of the mineral royalties, the severance taxes, the sales taxes, and that's where the city's getting 50 to 60% of its revenue from. And so that really can impact us, and unfortunately is not anything concrete. We're going to have to wait and see what happens with that and where we're going to be. So I think really being fiscally responsible with what we have, which then in turn leads us to, in my mind, let's focus on our core and make sure that we're taking care of the necessities that we need, which is our roads, our infrastructure, our employees, our city safety. I think once we have the core, and as long as we're able to maintain that and keep that maintained or even improve what we have, then the economic development and the quality of life will follow that. But if we can't do that and someone can't drive down the street to get home without losing their car in a pothole or anything like that, even having the safety response time, whether it's with the police or the fire department, are people going to want to stay here? Are they going to have better opportunities someplace else? And so I think that being responsible with what we have, really making sure that we're taking care of that, and that needs to be our primary focus with the uncertainty of where our economy is going to be over the next couple of years.
Tracy?
Yes.
You've mentioned the core services a couple of times. So one of the primary duties of government is to provide essential government services. Have you defined in your own mind what you consider to be essential government services, second-tier government services, maybe even third-tier government services?
Well, and I think that that really differs between individuals with that. And so that's one of those that I think that obviously our roads are a huge concern to everyone right now. And so that infrastructure with that, making sure that we are able to get from A to B. I think roads are a primary. Also our water and sanitation, which Mr. Wilson and the Board of Public Utilities, they've done fantastic with that. I know that they had just sent with their bills here in the past month their overall survey and where they've ranked, and they do a fantastic job. But we've got to keep that going. If we don't have water and sewer and sanitation, that's our lifeblood. We all are sitting here with some water in front of us. If we don't have those integral day-to-day necessities taken care of, we're not going to have a city.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please describe your vision of Cheyenne for us.
My vision of Cheyenne, I think right now in the next few years is a slow, steady growth. That way we can maintain and live within our budget, within our means, with everything that we've got. And so if we do that, I think that slowly we'll be able to develop that. We're seeing some inroads with some new businesses, new things coming into Cheyenne, which is fantastic. Downtown, I know we have some new restaurants, some new businesses. Cheyenne Leads has been great with bringing in some larger ones, Magpul, for example, within the past few years. And those are things that are really good for our city. And if we can maintain that and keep that going, I don't think that we need to do it at a lickety split pace of let's bring in 50 businesses in the next 6 months. That's not necessarily realistic because we may not have the infrastructure for those people that are looking at relocating here. But if we can focus and say, this is what we've got this great town, it's going to encourage people to invest in our community, whether it's bringing their businesses, whether it's staying here, whether it's saying, hey, this is a great place, I'm going to move my family here and relocate.
Are there any amenities or anything that you think the community doesn't have that it really needs, and how would you go about making that happen as a council member?
I think right now where we're at, we've got a very good set of amenities. I think a lot of people would like to see more. Once again, if it's feasible, we can do that. But I know that everything is underway with the new Universal Park for the kids, with those type of things. We've also got the Downtown Development Core Plan that is in process, and the partnerships with that. There's some really good items that are in that, and they may be small, but those do help with our quality of life. Just doing the lighting up downtown, and even with those plans, I think that the timeline is realistic over the next several years with that plan, and it's not overstepping where we are uncertain with where our finances are going to be.
So what are your priorities for economic development, and how would you make that happen as a member of the council?
Well, I think economic development is one of those that is extremely important. We need that. But once again, I think that if we don't have our core, the economic development is not going to follow as soon if we're not continuing with maintaining what we have. So the economic development, I think a lot of the partnerships that have been formed in town, getting back to the Downtown Development Core Plan, that's an integrated partnership with the Chamber, with the DDA, with Visit Cheyenne, with Black Hills. I believe that they're involved. And so getting those partnerships where people can work together, have those lines of communication, and saying, hey, we're all on the same page. We think that these are really good things that are going to keep propelling our community forward. And that is a really good thing, that everyone can work together and maintaining that and keeping that momentum going forward, where there's a lot of interest from a lot of different people, organizations, whether they're civic, whether they're governmental, whether they're private, that really helps spur it and keeps everything moving forward. And that working together mentality is a very important thing for all of us. Excuse me.
You mentioned the downtown core project a little bit. What would your support be for that plan, for the West Edge project, or some of the other things about the future of downtown, and how big a priority would that be for you as a council?
Well, in the West Edge project, their final plan was put together in November of 2014 for that. And it, of course, focuses on flood control, which is one of our, I believe, part of our core structure that we need to focus on. And so that would be very important. Also the brownfields, with looking at the buildings and some of our spaces that are underutilized or not being utilized, with the abandoned buildings, the public spaces, and reinvesting. So I think that parts of them we really do need to focus on. With West Edge, for example, the flood protection, that's something that's going to benefit our entire community, not just downtown. It's going to benefit the residents. It's going to benefit the homeowners in those areas too. And so that's one that maybe we need to be selected depending on what kind of money we have, of what can we do and what are our priorities within some of these projects, and reprioritize some of those within, even though there is a plan there for that. And I think that really top on my list would be flood control. That is one of the safety issues that faces us. I live in a floodplain, so it's one of those that I think about. I see that with some of the storms that we've had, and the city's done a good job of things, but it still is a concern when you could possibly lose your business, your home, different things like that. And so that's something that we need to do, and maybe look at the individual projects within and reprioritize where those need to be depending on our economic situation.
Tracy, I'd like to follow up on the downtown core you mentioned in the West Edge.
Certainly.
So if there is monies available, would you direct them towards the downtown core, which has that plan? Or would there be a concern of directing those dollars to the West Edge, possibly spreading? Do you have any
You know,
priorities on that? or
I
what do you
think that the downtown core development has a lot of partners involved in that, with everyone that's involved. My concern with just the downtown core development is it's such a small area, about a 6 to 9 block radius, that's only running from Pioneer to Warren and 15th to 17th. And so I think that what we really need to evaluate with some of those projects is that money that we can put towards that better utilized for a larger area of Cheyenne with that. And that's where I think that we really need to prioritize. I believe that, one of the issues in the downtown core development is some of the utilities and partnering with Black Hills, with the alley utilities. And that's one of those that, not that that isn't a nice aesthetic to have, but we've had that situation where it's been as long as I can remember. I'm not sure that that's a top priority of money being spent the most fiscally wise way. It's something that we've been able to live with this, so can we take that money, maybe funnel it someplace else that really needs some improvement, and maybe will help develop the West Edge versus just that small edge, because the West Edge does impact so many more people.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tracy, how do you feel about the use of taxpayer money for amenities like the Children's Museum downtown?
I have concerns with that, multifaceted. I believe the original plan with that was that it was going to be privately funded. Now we have a group that is looking of adding a 7th percentage quarter tax. There's a lot of different charities, nonprofits, and organizations in this town that have been here for numerous years that have made it without doing that. And it opens the door. I'm not saying that groups aren't worthy of that, but when you can get out there, if that community support is behind it, those donations should be there. So many other groups, whether it's Meals on Wheels, whether it's Habitat for Humanity, that's my organization, Needs, Safe House, those groups and organizations have been able to do this for all of these years, keep things running, keep things going without asking for public money to assist with that. And with studying some of the numbers, there's some concerns on how profitable is it going to be. I am not as familiar with the Children's Museum as I should be, I'll admit that up front. But when I look at Fort Collins numbers from their federal returns from their 990s, they have been losing money and over the past several years. And those are public records that anybody can access, read that information and make their own decisions. But it does give me some concern if we're going to be asking the public for their money to support something that may not necessarily be a good use of tax dollars, and where it does open the door, not that that's a bad thing, for other charities and nonprofits in town to say, hey, we're having a rough time, but they're all able to make it, whether it's through grants, whether it's through private donations, whether it's through time and effort. A lot of people may not have the money to contribute to a group or organization, but in exchange, they're donating their time and their effort, and they're out doing that and being involved with that. And so I think that that is a little bit, I'm not comfortable with seeing that on a tax ballot.
as a follow-up related to that.
I do. There are public dollars
Mhm.
from the general fund
Yes,
and from the fifth penny that the city and the county put into the United Way so that the United Way can fund some of those, provide some funding for those agencies.
provide some, correct.
So there is some public funding that goes
Yes.
out.
But I think that the public funding that United Way is getting and the amount of groups and organizations that they serve is a much smaller amount than what the groups themselves are able to raise through grants and those type of things. And it's not just one specific organization that's benefiting from that. It's a large range of groups and services that are able to utilize that to stretch their dollars. And so that's where my concern comes in.
But do you support the continued use of some of those city monies through United Ways or from those
Through
organizations?
United Way, yes, because I know that there is an application process through that. United Way goes through, they accept their applications, they vet it, they determine with their criteria where that money's gonna go and how that's going to be distributed amongst those groups. And that is very worthwhile.
Tracy, from what you've said so far, it sounds like you're relatively cautious, kind of conservative about how the city spends its money. What would be your priorities for the city as a member of the council for how it spends its money, how much it saves? What do you think is the right use of city money?
You know, I think that really we need to take care of our city employees. I know that that may not have been, there's a lot of differing opinions on the city approving the raise for the city employees at last week's council meeting. As I've said before, the city employees are what keeps us functioning on a day-to-day basis. So let's look at that. We also need to evaluate the budgets because I really do think that the department heads did a great job this year in coming in under budget. But are there other areas that they might be able to streamline services and bring that together to save some money that down the road we'll need to do? And if we can grow any of our savings, that's fantastic. But I know this year with the city raises, the city council approved dipping into reserves to cover that. And so that is one of those that I think really if we can get everything together within a budget without having to tap into those reserves, which is probably a little unrealistic, but that's what we need to focus on. I mean, in our daily lives, each of us have a certain amount of money that we're able to do, and that's what we've got to live on. And that's what the city needs to strive to do too, is here's our budget, here's what we're going to stay within. If we do have extra, then let's put that away and do that. But with the uncertainty that's coming down the next few years at us, I'm not sure how much we'll be able to actually save. But if we can at least stay within our budget, just like we need to do in our own households, that's the most important part.
Tracy, you just mentioned that the department heads did a good job this year. In general, the mayor's kind of drafted the budget and said, here it is.
Correct.
And they have to live with that.
Mhm.
Would you change that process as a member of the council?
You know, I am not sure if I would or not. I think that having those lines of communications between department heads and the mayor is an important thing, whomever our mayor is going to be, because we know that we are going to be having a new mayor in January, regardless of what happens. And that may ultimately be up to them. I think city council can make recommendations, but you can't tell them exactly what they need to do per se with that. So I think that whoever comes in needs to sit down, be familiar with the different city organizations, with the different department heads, and have those talks. And I think that city council, it doesn't hurt them to try to get to know the different departments and what they can do to assist them also. And so I would like to see all of them working together to find that common solution.
Tracy, we have about a little over 5 minutes left. The development of the city-owned Belvoir Ranch has been discussed a bit, especially for some recreational
It
opportunities.
has been.
How big of a priority would that be for you?
Well, you know, the Belvoir Ranch was purchased in 2003. and the big hole was purchased in 2005. The master plan for Belvoir was completed in September of 2008. And so my concern, I think Belvoir is a great space for all of us. But when I go back and I evaluate that master plan that was conducted in 2008 for Belvoir, the 5 to 15-year plan, we're not there at all. And this plan was completed in 2008. I think that it would be a really great thing if we could continue on some of those, maybe get back on track with that plan where we've got parking and accessible trails that were in the 1 to 2 year plan on the original Belvoir master plan that was done, like I said, in 2008. So we're already well over 6 to 8 years behind on that plan. And it would, I think that Belvoir could open up some different recreational activities and possibly even some revenue if we can get some recreational with that. But that is also going to be figuring out, do we have the funds to do this? And I think that if we can find some of that, that's a great quality of life for our citizens and even from people outside of our area that are in our proximity. But I think first and foremost, getting the parking lots, getting accessible trails and the parking is what we need to do before we can even proceed to follow that master plan that's been on our radar for 8 years now.
What would your priorities be for the city's portion of the next sixth penny ballot, which looks like it's coming about next May?
I think that our priorities really need to be once again, our core, our infrastructure with making sure our roads, our water, our sanitation. I mean, the water and sanitation is an enterprise fund through the city. So it does have its own. They did approve that increase in those fees recently at the council, but not that anybody wants to see fees increase, but that's something that we really do need to look at because we're limited on what we have at Happy Jack and we're taking so many things to alt. How long is that going to last? We need to be exploring those options. And so by doing that, so enterprise fund with the water, that I think is right now self-sustaining within that. So I think if we really focus on our core with focusing safety with the police department, they have open positions that they haven't been able to fill. We've got our road maintenance. Let's really evaluate that and see where are our roads at? How many of these potholes, these alligator cracks that we have? I know Ms. Nemechek at the last council meeting was given $100,000 to put towards our roads. And as she stated that night, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what we actually need. So if we let them, we don't want to see them deteriorate to a point that we cannot recover them. So I think that we really need to focus on our streets, roadways with that and being able to know that we've got a stream of income that's going to be allocated for that.
How do you feel about an anti-discrimination ordinance for Cheyenne? Is that something that the city ought to pass?
You know, I think that a non-discrimination ordinance is an important thing. I think it would really depend on how it's drafted and what the wording is within that. I have not been privy to some that may have been drafted or not, but I think that it needs to be a well-crafted, well-drafted and written document that would need to have the involvement of the citizens and the different groups and organizations involved in pulling that together to make sure that it is a solid piece of legislation.
And is that something you think the city should pass, or is it better left to the state or the feds, or what do you think?
Well, and you know, there's so many different things. I think my concern if the city of Cheyenne does pass a non-discrimination ordinance would be enforcement. And how do you enforce this? And that would be the challenge. We don't have anything really set up in place for just that. And so maybe following the lead, see what the state does. I know Laramie does have an ordinance in place, but looking at those, really studying how have other cities, when they've passed these, How have they drafted it? How is it crafted? How is this going to protect people? How is there going to be enforcement of this also? Because I think that that's another very important thing within that. And so studying some of those cities around us, I think would be very important before passing that.
You guys have any other questions? Is there anything, Tracy, that we didn't cover that you'd like to mention?
You know, I want to say thank you for doing this and making this forum available for people. And I would just really like to see people get involved in our city, in our community, at the local level. We can sit down like this and have a conversation. We're a city of 60,000+ people, but we all live here and we're still small enough that get out, get involved. If you have concerns, if you have issues, be sure to talk to your councilman, the mayor, even the county commissioners. Everyone there is very accessible, even the department heads. You can pick up the phone, you can talk to them. If you have questions, if you have concerns, I think people getting involved in their community is a really important thing.
Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Very
Appreciate it.
welcome.